Well, guys, what's up? It's your boy RJ Game News USA here, back today with another video. And today we are putting Sony in the crosshairs because they are getting absolutely destroyed both by public perception and by other creators. But what's gone on recently with media backlash, mainstream media backlash, and governments now starting to talk lawsuit with Sony and antitrust, there's a lot going on, and Sony may be forced to reverse their decision on physical discs or compensate people in some way. So, if you like the gaming news and you like this kind of content, stick around, like, share, and subscribe. I have multiple news stories here to cover about Sony and the physical disc situation. First up, we got to talk about NBC's investigation of Sony. NBC News investigated Sony's controversial plan to end physical disc production for the new PlayStation games starting in January 2028. The investigation highlights massive backlash from gamers who fear they will only own recoverable licenses and lose the ability to share or resell games. Sony plans to halt the manufacturing of physical game discs for new releases by January 2028. This means future console iterations, such as the rumored PlayStation 6, will likely be entirely digital. The announcement came right after Sony revoked digital access to over 500 previously purchased movies from users' libraries. This caused players to worry that digital video games will face the same fate. Consumer advocacy groups and players are fighting to save the disc because digital-only platforms threaten long-term game preservation. Once storefronts close, like Sony's shutdown of older PS3 and PS Vita stores, games can disappear forever. Sony justifies the phase-out by claiming digital sales are skyrocketed, with the digital formats making up 78 to 85% of their total sales. However, critics argue this data is inflated by including indie and mobile-only games. Leaked documents from Insomniac Games previously suggested that Sony's own single-player titles will strongly favor physical media. Industry watchers believe the shift away from discs is a financial strategy to maximize Sony's profit margin. Selling games directly through the PlayStation Store cuts out manufacturing and distribution costs. It also completely eliminates the $7 billion secondhand market, allowing Sony to strictly control all game pricing. Damn, NBC flatly investigated, called out Sony right to their face. NBC News is one of the biggest news organizations in the world. This has officially broke containment. This has gone mainstream. And I think even if you buy all your games digital, you must understand the two complaints here. You really have to understand the two complaints. And I believe there are ways to fix it. So, first of all, there are many countries around the world that do not have the internet infrastructure. Even some rural areas in America don't have the internet structure to be able to download digital-only games. For instance, when PlayStation ever required a PSN account to play a game, like when they did Helldivers and they had to reverse the decision on that, there were like 150 plus countries out of the world that just flatly couldn't access the game. Most gaming around the world, especially in cheap countries, is done through PC. But for people that are able to get a PlayStation, they don't have the internet to access PSN sometimes. You know, internet speeds are not up to snuff around the world. So they're cutting off people in many, many parts of the world. That's one thing to consider. The other thing to consider is you don't own the digital rights. This could easily be fixed if there was a transfer system that could be done with digital games. For instance, you being able to give out your download code to a friend that's temporary and then it returns to the owner. Or if there was a way you could secondhand sell a digital game, which would be possible if Sony would allow the tech to exist. Instead, what they want to do is corner you in the market where you can never resell the game. They want to be the only storefront and therefore maximize their amount of profit. even if they lose more customers in the process and gain bad will. Now, public pressure alone and media pressure alone may not convince Sony to change their mind. However, we do have lawsuits and antitrust lawsuits coming from other countries. And we know the European nations will be involved because they already are forcing Nintendo Switch 2 to get a replaceable battery, which may only be in Europe, but consumer advocacy groups could cause change tremendously. However, the first country up that I'm surprised is doing this lawsuit, it's Mexico. And let's go over that. Mexican lawmakers are taking legal action against Sony, planning to file antitrust complaints with the country's competition regulator. The politicians are targeting Sony's shift to digital-only PlayStation games, arguing this will create a monopoly, eliminate used games, and leave the gamers at the mercy of company pricing. The pushback against Sony in Mexico involves key specific issues and consumer concerns. The digital-only threat. Mexican lawmakers Reyes and Luis Donaldo Colosio announced they are pushing back against Sony's shift in its console strategy. By limiting game access to the PlayStation Store, Sony will control the console, distribution, and prices. This threatens to harm local retail stores and destroy the used game market. Lawmakers argue that gamers are no longer buying games, but only renting digital licenses that can be changed or revoked at any time. Mexico is not alone in the fight. Similar lawsuits are underway in Europe regarding Sony's dominant control over PlayStation pricing and digital practices. And we will go over that here in a second. But first, I want to say, congratulations to Mexico. Apparently, you have more balls than the United States. We fought tooth and nail against Microsoft acquiring Activision Blizzard. And I'll be the first to admit, I was a fucking idiot. I thought it'd be a great idea for Microsoft to acquire Activision Blizzard. And what happened? The FTC got rolled in court. Microsoft bought Activision Blizzard, and then everything sucked. They never put the Call of Duty games on Game Pass, and now they never intend to. So we all got fucked as a result, right? But now, as somebody who's very libertarian and against a lot of government overreach, I'm really all about that consumer protection. And that's one of the few things I think government can do to help people. And so, on the consumer protection front, I'm very disappointed the United States hasn't done anything about this. This is a Japanese company that is trying to get around importing games to your country and force everybody into a digital storefront. Fuck that. Mexico at least is standing up for itself. And Mexico has a lot of areas there where they don't have the internet access. So that may explain why. However, we do have Dutch Consumers Foundation stitching Massaschide and Consumerant also weighing in. They're suing Sony for 400 million euro, which is about $457 million. The class action lawsuit claims Sony closed PlayStation Store forces players to overpay for digital games and in-game content by exploiting market dominance. They say unlike PC gaming, where you can buy digital keys from multiple stores like Steam, Epic, or Greenman Gaming, PlayStation users can only buy digital content directly from Sony. Because of this monopoly, the foundation argues that Sony inflates prices, sometimes making digital copies up to 47% more expensive than a physical disc. The lawsuit gained massive momentum, allowing Sony's announcement that they will completely stop manufacturing physical discs for PlayStation 5 games by January 2028. The consumer group argues that by removing physical media, it destroys the secondhand market and any alternative purchasing options, leaving players completely at the mercy of whatever Sony dictates. The Fair PlayStation lawsuit represents roughly 1.7 million PlayStation users in the Netherlands. Any Dutch customer who has made a purchase on the PlayStation Store since November 29, 2013 is eligible to join the claim for compensation. If the court rules in favor of the foundation, Sony could be forced to allow third-party digital sales, lower its store commission fees, and pay massive damages to affected players. This allows similar legal scrutiny in the UK, where Sony faces a $2 billion, $2.67 billion, it's 2 billion euros, $2.67 billion antitrust lawsuit regarding the exact same digital pricing practices. Congratulations, Sony. You opened this can of worms yourself. I hope you enjoy the lawsuits. I hope you enjoy all the scrutiny you're getting, all the backlash and all the hell you're getting. As somebody who has a PS5 digital-only console and has no problem going to the store, I understand physical games sometimes get sold cheaper. I understand that there is an entire economy about selling and rebuying and reselling used games. I used to do it all the time when I was younger and needed more of the money to be able to purchase more games and play more games. This is a complete lack of respect for people's libraries they've built up for decades. That's physical, that has no way to transfer over to digital currently on your next system. And you're going to go put out like a $1,500 PS6 and expect the enthusiasts that you're pissing off to champion your system, despite the fact it's going to be a digital-only system. And maybe you include a $200 attached-on disk drive that maybe will play older PlayStation games. But you're out here having God of War Le Fay have to clarify to people, the game will be available physically, we promise. Are we sure? What if the game is delayed past January 2028 for some reason? Then there won't be any physical discs printed. You're also shutting down jobs that make the physical discs and trying to convert people over to AI lenses or whatever, which is also supporting the whole AI problem, which is why we're in the RAM problem to begin with because of AI data centers, which is jacking up the price of RAM, which is hurting the gaming console business. If things continue on the path that they're continuing, clearly Nintendo is going to run away with this console generation without a doubt, despite the fact that both Sony and Microsoft act as though Nintendo isn't actually their competition. Nintendo routinely spanks them in sales, in game sales, and in time played by people. Yet because they're a little bit underpowered, therefore way cheaper than them, they act like they aren't the competition at all. And let's be completely frank, Sony only feels disempowered to do this because Microsoft is in such a weak position where they're firing thousands of people currently and they're gutting studios that could put out good content. This is why competition is needed. Competition is good. And until we get to an era where you just go on your television and click an app and do cloud gaming with different services, which is the next great push by companies, then we're going to have a problem with overpriced box that want to force people into a walled garden of a single digital store without an alternative for a disc-based solution. So in my opinion, the analysis is very simple. Sony could go fuck itself, and I never plan on buying a PS6 as long as this attitude of theirs stays in place. Will I continue to enjoy my PS5? Sure, for as long as possible. But after January 2028, all bets are off if I decide I want to backlash and boycott Sony altogether. I highly suggest that people consider disbanding their PSN accounts or lowering down their PS Plus or boycotting in some fashion, calling up Sony, taking to Twitter, calling up your local representative to force change, such as what I am trying to do. Even if you're a digital-only purchaser, please consider that options are good, and options help people, and without these options that your game prices could go up and not down. We were sold a lie that digital goods could be cheaper if everything was digital, when that isn't really the case. Meanwhile, companies like Nintendo are doing great incentives to cause people to want to buy digital voluntarily, such as a $10 reduction in price of digital compared to physical, something Sony could have considered doing, but instead they chose the route of ripping the Band-Aid off and dealing with the backlash, which I hope they're enjoying. In conclusion, all I have to say is get fucked, Sony, and considering the fact that all your CEOs decided to sell your stock immediately after this announcement, I hope and wish that your executives would get investigated for insider trading. Because to be quite honest, to be this outwardly and openly corrupt, you deserve your failure, and your hubris will lead to your downfall. Gamers will not stand for these kind of changes that you've proposed. Not proposed, these kind of changes that you've thrust upon us, to be clear. No one asked for this, no one wanted this, no one is desiring this, even if you are a digital-only buyer. There is clearly no compensation coming the consumer's way or any sort of extra benefit whatsoever other than just losing more options and losing your ability to buy something at a cheaper price. So with that being said, guys, if you enjoyed the video, please like, share, and subscribe. Comment down below what you think of the situation. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you on the next one. RJ out. Have a good one.